In Lee's first big campaign, codenamed Operation Cold Store, he cowardly rounded up about 130 of his most feared political adversaries. In 1974, Tan Wah Piao and other student leaders of the University of Singapore Students' Union organized events that called for the release of the ISA detainees. For his effort, Tan was arrested and jailed for a year for inciting riots. In 1987, 22 members of the Roman Catholic Church, social activists, and professionals were detained under the ISA. Former Solicitor General Mr. Francis Xiao represented one of the detainees, Ms. Chiu So-Lung. When Mr. Xiao attempted to visit Ms. Chiu at the Whitley Detention Center, he himself was detained and tortured by the ISD for more than 2 months. Today, PAP leaders do not use the ISA on their political opponents anymore. The PAP has found a more sophisticated way to quell those whom they think threaten their power: defamation suits. In all, Lee Kuan Yew and his cronies have sued his political opponents for defamation and won, of course, a total in excess of $10 million.
Mental Capacity Bill will replace and update Part 1 listing Mental Disorders and Treatment Act. The Mental Health Care and Treatment Bill will in turn replace Parts 2 and 3 of the Mental Disorders and Treatment Act. It aims to regulate the involuntary detention of a person in a psychiatric institution for treatment if A. he is suffering from a mental disorder which warrants the detention for treatment, and B. it is necessary in the interest of the health or safety of the person or for the protection of other persons that the person be detained.
According to the WHO, and I quote, in some countries where legislation has not been updated for many years, mental health legislation has resulted in the violation rather than the promotion of human rights of persons with mental disorders. And this too resulted in the violation of human rights, unquote. So far, I was hoping to see a different approach being taken in our legislation in the treatment and care of mentally disordered persons, but I find that the bill has fundamentally kept the same approach, which can be summed up as one that is institutional care and is rules-based. Quite a large portion of the bill dealt with giving powers to the police to arrest mentally disordered persons and powers to the magistrate and the psychiatric institution to admit or further detain a mentally person for treatment.
Many other countries, including UK and Australia, have similar provisions for involuntary treatment for persons suffering from mental disorders whose ability to make decisions about medical treatment
But Section 13.3 provides for the mentally disordered person to be detained for up to 12 months if ordered by the magistrate, and this could be further extended. Involuntary detention in a psychiatric institution for a prolonged period has come under scrutiny in many jurisdictions. As it restricts a person's rights, there is also potential for abuse. The WHO recommended that when involuntary treatment is necessary, the patients and their families and or personal representatives must have a right to appeal to a review body, tribunal and or court against the imposition of involuntary treatment. The UK is one example which followed this advice. How are the rights of a mentally disordered person protected from arbitrary exercise of power now that the powers of detention have been increased? Would the Minister consider establishing a mental health review tribunal akin to the UK situation to provide recourse to persons detained under this Act if they are unhappy with their long detention period?
Let me clarify that as compared to current Act, this bill does not increase the power of detention or the length of time for which a patient may be detained. On the contrary, this bill is to reduce the power of detention. I believe the current measures are adequate based on this actual experience, but we will study best practices overseas to see whether additional safety nets, such as the Trimuda that members mentioned about, should also be put in place. So I keep an open mind on this particular issue.
Sir, under Section 7, a police officer is authorized to apprehend any mentally disordered person who is believed to be dangerous to himself or to others. Could the Minister clarify what constitutes dangerous behavior? Could the Minister also clarify what procedures and protocols are in place for the police to ensure that there are proper safeguards so that the police can play a constructive and helpful role with respect to people with mental disorders during arrest? Are police officers trained to handle people with mental disorders? And how do they assess that a mentally disordered person is indeed dangerous to himself or to others? Section 8.4, the fine for a caregiver to produce a mentally disordered person for inspection by a police officer has been increased 4 times from $1,000 to $4,000. Could the Minister explain the rationale for this fourfold increase in fines, which would cause tremendous hardship to the caregivers, most of whom are already struggling to provide for their mentally disordered family members? So the question is, would increasing the fine help to address the problem, or are we only trying to deal with the symptoms? Sir, could the Minister enlighten this House on what measures will be taken to increase the number of psychiatrists to put this bill into effect? There are about 115 psychiatrists in Singapore, giving a psychiatrist to population ratio of about 2.6 per 100,000, which is low compared to other developed countries like the USA, which has a ratio of 13.7 per 100,000, the UK 11 per 100,000, and Australia 14 per 100,000. There is also a shortage across a whole range of mental health professionals: psychiatric nurses, clinical psychologists, psychiatric case managers, medical social workers, and occupational therapists. Can I ask the Minister what measures are being taken to recruit and train more of these staff as well? Sir, could the Ministry of Health also focus more on early intervention programs? Sir, could the Minister also review the current situation where mentally disordered persons are excluded from Medishield coverage, causing them hardship as their illness requires long-term treatment, particularly long-term hospitalization? Visitors are now required to inspect a psychiatric institution only once in 3 months. Could the Minister explain how less number of visits would benefit the mentally disordered patients and ensure better protection for them? Could the Minister clarify how this can be considered as an improvement, since visitors are now needed to visit 2 patients and only some parts of the psychiatric institution?
In short, police officers do receive training in handling persons with mental disorders. Mr. Ang Mong Seng asked if the police can be more proactive in getting patients behaving strangely before they become violent or dangerous, and to get them to seek treatment early. We certainly should try, whenever you come across such cases, to alert the medical officers and to the hospitals so that we can start early treatment